In the summer of 1911, a small passenger train left a station in northern Italy and headed toward Rome. It never arrived. I don't mean it derailed or caught fire. No wreckage was found. No bodies, no telegrams, no explanation. The train entered a mountain tunnel and, according to the most persistent version of the story, didn't come out the other side. Now, if that sounds impossible, you're not alone. It's been called a folk tale, a hoax, a story that grew in the retelling. But here's why it refuses to die. Scattered mentions across old travel diaries, local rumors about the tunnel that eats sound, and a handful of second-hand notes that hint at a search party finding nothing. Rails intact, air still, a faint smell of smoke and oil, but no train. Some accounts say the company that operated the train was a private outfit, Zanetti, running a special service with 3 carriages. Other versions put the number of passengers at just over 100. None of those details are easy to verify now. The official registers aren't publicly available or never existed in the first place, depending on who you ask. What we do know is this: people kept telling the same sequence. A bright morning departure, a slow climb through the hills, a long, fresh-cut tunnel where the air turns colder, a distant shout from the platform as the last carriage disappears into the dark, and then silence. You could dismiss it. A century-old campfire tale. Except the story won't stay put. It resurfaces every few years in new places. Someone claims their great-grandfather worked the line that day. Someone else insists a priest wrote about a procession swallowed by night. Is any of it provable? Not by me, not today. But in the archives, official and not so official, you sometimes find things that feel like fingerprints. Smudged, partial, hard to match, yet stubbornly human. And if even a fraction of this is true, then somewhere inside that tunnel, the day didn't end the way it should have. This is the file we're opening tonight. This is the Vanishing Train. Most versions agree on this much. The train was small, polished, and proud. 3 carriages and a coal-fired engine. A private charter, or a special seasonal route, depending on who's telling it. The passengers? Imagine a snapshot of 1911 in motion. Stiff collars and straw boaters, travel trunks with brass corners, postcards tucked into guidebooks. A few families, a handful of businessmen, a pair of newlyweds who had written Roma on their luggage tag in looping script. People on their way somewhere, not expecting to become somebody else's story. A conductor, name uncertain, was said to be meticulous. He checked tickets twice. One online retelling claims there was even a typed list of names, a manifest that surfaced decades later and then vanished again. No original ledger has ever been produced, but that's how these things go. Evidence arrives as a whisper, leaves as a rumor. What I like to picture, only because it makes the whole thing feel uncomfortably real, is the moment just before the tunnel. The window glass vibrating at a steady rhythm, coal grit in the air, somebody adjusting a hat pin, somebody else closing a novel at the exact same sentence they've already read 3 times. A little boy counting telegraph poles, a man in the aisle holding on to the leather strap, glancing at his watch as the engine throttles down. Outside, hills roll by in green waves. A shepherd waves. The sun slips behind a ridge. The tunnel mouth is a black coin set into the mountain. There's a part of the tale where a station porter remembers hearing the brakes squeal, and then nothing, as if the train's weight simply disappeared from the rails. Not suddenly, not with a bang, just less, like subtracting a number you can't quite see. None of this is proof. But if you've ever stood beside a track and felt a train move through you, felt the air punch your chest and the ground talk to your bones, you know how hard it is to imagine that force going nowhere. And that's where the story insists it went. Into the tunnel, into the dark, and then into a silence that never learned how to give anything back. The tunnel itself was nothing extraordinary on paper. A fresh-cut passage through the Lombardy hills, lined with stone and timber, wide enough for a single track. Trains had passed through it before. Trains would pass through it again. But on that summer day in 1911, one particular train didn't come out. Witnesses at the entrance described the sound first. The engine roared, the brakes hissed, the usual thunder of steel wheels echoed inside, and then it thinned out, as if the noise had been swallowed, muffled in a way that even seasoned railway workers found unsettling. A farmer standing on a ridge claimed he heard a metallic shriek echo out, followed by something stranger, a rush of air, almost like a sigh. Then nothing. Search parties were organized. Men with lanterns walked the entire length of the tunnel. They found the rails intact, perfectly aligned, still warm from the wheels that had rolled over them minutes earlier. No broken ties, no collapsed walls, no sign of smoke or ash, just emptiness. One report mentions a peculiar detail. At the halfway point, the air grew cold. Not the ordinary chill of stone, but the kind that prickles the back of your neck. A few men said they smelled something chemical, sharp, almost like ozone before a lightning strike. By nightfall, the tunnel was cleared, blocked, then cleared again. No train, no carriages, not even a dropped glove or luggage strap. The only trace left behind was the impression of weight, the certainty that something massive had been there and had gone somewhere it shouldn't have been able to go. The official explanation was silence. Literally. No statement, no press release, just paperwork filed away, and rumors left to carry the rest. And that, perhaps, was the most disturbing part. Not just what disappeared, but how quickly the world looked away. By the following morning, by then it was all of Lombardy, was whispering about the train. People gathered at both ends of the tunnel. Some swore they'd seen lights flickering inside during the night. Others claimed they heard the echo of wheels, even though no train had entered since the disappearance. Search crews went back in with lanterns and ropes. This time, they took careful measurements. The tunnel was exactly 1,407 meters long, perfectly straight. You could see the faint glow of daylight at the far end. There was nowhere for a train to hide. And yet, the rails told another story. Inspectors noted that the first 100 meters carried a faint residue, oil stains, soot, even the warmth of recent friction. Then, suddenly, the signs ended. Clean stone. Cold air. The trail just stopped, as if the carriages had dissolved into nothing. One detail recorded in a margin note: the silence inside the tunnel was overwhelming. Not the ordinary quiet of stone, but a swallowing hush. Shouts sounded muted. Lantern flames flickered strangely, as though the air was heavier, thicker. By the third sweep, the men grew restless. A few refused to go back in. One swore that halfway down he heard a low hum, like wires vibrating deep in the rock. Another said he caught the smell of sulfur. Their foreman wrote simply, "Nothing recovered. Recommend closure." And that was it. The search was called off after 3 days. No wreckage, no bodies, no luggage. The official line became, "Record-keeping error." The Zanetti company quietly folded within the year. And the tunnel. It remained in use for decades after. Ordinary trains in, ordinary trains out, until the line was eventually retired. But the 1911 train never reappeared. Not in Lombardy. Not anywhere. After the official search ended, the story of the vanishing train didn't die. It just shifted into whispers. Villagers told tales of hearing the whistle on foggy nights long after the Zanetti line had been shut down. Shepherds swore they saw lantern lights flicker inside the tunnel when no train was due. Some claimed the ground itself trembled, as if a heavy engine was still passing underneath, unseen. The strangest rumors came from far beyond Lombardy. In the 1920s, newspapers in Mexico ran a bizarre story about a phantom European train sighted near a small town outside Veracruz. Witnesses described 3 carriages of old design, painted dark, rolling silently across open fields where no tracks existed. By the time villagers approached, the train had already faded into the distance. A decade later, a priest in Kiev allegedly recorded a confession from an old woman who insisted she had been a child passenger on the missing train. She described waking up in a field with no carriages, no tracks, no other passengers, just silence and fog. No one ever confirmed her identity, but the account has been copied into several retellings. Historians who examined the tale often dismissed these stories as folklore. A ghost story for railway men, one journal put it. But even skeptics admitted the consistency was unusual. The dates, the number of carriages, the sense of suffocating silence, all repeated across different countries, different decades. What makes it linger is not the proof, but the absence of it. A disappearance too big to ignore, too strange to resolve, and too eerie to ever be written off completely. And that's how the vanishing train passed from a failed investigation into something larger, a legend that refuses to stop rolling forward. When a story refuses to die, theories take its place. The simplest explanation offered was paperwork. Railway companies of the early 1900s were infamous for sloppy manifests, missing records, even full carriages miscounted. According to skeptics, the Zanetti company may never have existed at all. Just a rumor snowballed into legend. But that doesn't explain the eyewitnesses, the people who swore they saw the train vanish into the tunnel and never reemerge. The second theory leaned mechanical, a collapse perhaps, that buried the train deep within the hillside. But no debris was ever found, and the tunnel remained perfectly passable for decades. Later trains passed through without issue. There was no cave-in, no sign of repairs. Then came the stranger versions. Some claimed the train slipped into a pocket of time, an accidental corridor, a fold in reality itself. A few writers even tied it to time-slip cases reported elsewhere in Europe, where travelers described stepping briefly into other centuries. If true, then the Zanetti passengers might still be alive, in some other year, looking out the windows for a station that will never appear. Others framed it as something supernatural, a cursed tunnel, a bargain unkept, an entire town offering the train as a tithe. In these retellings, the silence of the passengers wasn't natural, it was chosen or taken. What's consistent across every theory is the absence of closure. No wreckage, no bodies, no ticket stubs or lost luggage. For over 100 years, the tunnel has been as empty as it was that morning, with nothing more than the rumor of steel wheels echoing in the dark. And so the theories multiply, because when there is no evidence, speculation fills the gap. The vanishing train becomes whatever people need it to be, a mystery, a metaphor, or perhaps a warning. If the official records had ended there, the story might have been forgotten. But then came the sightings. The first surfaced in 1926, 15 years after the disappearance. A station worker in southern Italy swore he saw an antique train pulling into a freight yard late one night. It matched the Zanetti description, 3 carriages, old-fashioned design. But when he approached, the cars were empty. He blinked, and the entire train seemed to dissolve like smoke. His supervisor filed the account under fatigue. A decade later, in 1934, a rural paper in Hungary ran a brief article. Villagers claimed a train had thundered through fields where no tracks existed. Silent, lit from within, and moving faster than wind, the headline read. The story was pulled the next day, but clippings survive in private collections. Then there was the account from 1950s Ukraine. A group of workers reported hearing a train whistle echo across the steppe. They looked up to see 3 carriages suspended in mist above the ground. Within seconds, the vision faded. None of them spoke of it again publicly, except one who left a diary note. They were still inside, watching us. Most historians write these off as folklore, or simply people borrowing details from an existing legend. And maybe that's true. But what unsettles researchers isn't the variety of the tales, it's their consistency. Always 3 carriages, always silent, always gone before anyone can do more than stare. If it's fiction, it's remarkably persistent. If it's more than fiction, maybe the train is still out there, glimpsed like a mirage, stuck in a loop between places it was never meant to be. Stories like this survive because of the fragments they leave behind, bits of paper, rumors of documents that once existed, and the eerie silence where official records should be. In the 1960s, a researcher in Milan claimed to have uncovered part of a passenger manifest for the Zanetti train. It listed 106 names, typed neatly on yellowed paper, with a company stamp at the bottom. But when others asked to see it, the document had gone missing. The researcher insisted he'd filed it in an archive drawer, only to return days later and find the folder empty. Another rumor describes a box of personal belongings, travel trunks and leather suitcases, allegedly found in a storage yard near Turin. According to the story, the luggage bore 1911 labels, but no owners ever came forward to claim them. Some even said the clothes inside were decades out of date, as though they'd aged unnaturally fast. No photographs of this evidence exist, only the testimony of a yard worker who later refused to speak about it again. And then there are the microfilm reels. In the 1980s, an Italian historian reported receiving a spool labeled Zanetti Company. When he ran it through a reader, the images were unclear. Blurred shots of a train platform, indistinct faces, and one frame that seemed to show a tunnel entrance. But the reel jammed halfway through, burned, and crumbled to ash. Conveniently, or suspiciously, no copy has ever surfaced since. What all these so-called artifacts share is impermanence. They appear suddenly, convince just enough people to spread the story, then vanish. It's almost as if the mystery defends itself, erasing evidence the moment someone gets too close. Or maybe it's simpler. Maybe there never was a train. Maybe there was only a story, and the story is all that survives. By the late 20th century, the Vanishing Train had become more than a ghost story. It was a riddle that kept resurfacing in unexpected places. Paranormal researchers in the 1970s pointed to it as one of the earliest mass disappearance events tied to time anomalies. They compared it to the Bermuda Triangle, suggesting that certain locations on Earth acted as gateways, geographical fault lines between dimensions. Grayditch, they argued, wasn't just a railway tunnel, it was one such fault line. Meanwhile, skeptics in academia offered a different perspective. Some insisted the story was a fabricated hoax, circulated first in newspapers hungry for sensational copy, then embellished through oral retellings. One Italian historian wrote, thoughtful, "The train never existed. The Zanetti Company is a name without records. What we are seeing is folklore in real time. And yet, for every attempt to debunk it, another odd detail seemed to surface." In the 1990s, a Russian magazine ran an article about ghost transport phenomena, claiming that a group of hikers in the Carpathians heard the roar of a steam engine and saw lantern light flicker across the hillsides, decades after steam had vanished from Europe's rails. The description matched the Zanetti train down to the number of carriages. Theories ranged from the natural to the supernatural, but all shared one frustration: the lack of closure. No wreckage, no graves, no confession of fraud, just absence, stubborn and unyielding. It's this very emptiness that fuels the legend, because when a question can't be answered, the imagination rushes in to fill the gap. And in that gap, the vanishing train keeps moving, an engine without end, circling somewhere just out of sight. A story like The Vanishing Train leaves you with two choices: dismiss it as myth, or live with the possibility that something unexplainable happened. On one hand, the facts dissolve the closer you look. No official documents survive. The so-called manifests, the burned microfilm, the mysterious luggage, all anecdotal. Thoughtful. Skeptics are right when they say extraordinary claims demand extraordinary proof, and there simply isn't any. But legends aren't built on proof. They're built on the shape of silence, on details repeated too consistently to ignore. 3 carriages, the date 1911, the hush inside the tunnel. They're built on the way people lean in when the story is told, imagining the lanterns, the fog, the faces pressed to windows that never reappeared. What unsettles me most isn't whether the train truly vanished, but the idea behind it. That something so heavy, so full of lives, could simply slip away. That the rails we trust to lead us somewhere might, just once, lead us nowhere at all. And maybe that's why the tale survives. Because deep down, we all fear what might be waiting in the dark ahead. A turn in the track, a door that doesn't open, a tunnel that doesn't end. If the vanishing train is only folklore, it's a chillingly effective one. If it's more than folklore, then perhaps somewhere out there, a whistle still blows in the fog, and 100 passengers are staring out windows into a world that isn't ours. That's the file. That's the story. And as with so many others in these archives, the final answer remains sealed in silence.